Good morning, my fellow Canadians, and hopefully Americans or anybody else who watches this. I've said it in previous posts. The first military dictum is know your enemy. That is vital to any decision regarding either state-to-state interaction or military interaction. You have to know your enemy. Know how he thinks, know how he feels, know what he believes. Specifically, I want to talk about Russia and Russian propaganda. I listen to the pro-Russian propaganda, and insofar as I can stomach it, because it is so abysmally ignorant, it's enough to make me want to puke. It's like listening to a Trudeau speech. You can only take so much of it before you've got to tune out and move to something else, because it is literally that nauseating. There's several things I'd like to address in the Russian propaganda war, which has been, I must say, very effective. I've had people here at meetings repeat to me Russian propaganda. One of the big ones was that donated weaponry is finding its way onto the black market, and that the Ukrainians are selling donated Western weapons on the black market. Zelensky was in a meeting with the Western allies, and he, understand this, he brought this up, tabled it. Either as the first item or one of the first items on the agenda that he wished to address, because he was livid and concerned that people would believe this. And it was very, very, very well done on the part of the Russians. He brought flowcharts, logistical flowcharts, showing what had been donated and where it had wound up. And everything was open. They could send in independent scrutineers to trace the flow of donated weaponry from depots and warehouses, from reception to warehouses, and then to logistical distribution. And there was an independent group that attempted to buy on the dark web, to buy some of these weapons. Guess what? Currently unavailable. Everything they attempted to buy was currently unavailable. And there are still people out here repeating, Ukraine is selling donated weaponry on the black market. Well, that's a lie. That's bullshit. And a very, very sophisticated part of Russian propaganda. Now, propaganda on the Russian part is very interesting, because I don't know if it's deliberate or if it's just lucky happenstance. But Russians are capable of extremely sophisticated, like the black market, extremely sophisticated propaganda. But some of it is so overtly stupid that people here look and they say, no, that's crap. Like a 3-year-old mentally defective would not believe this stuff that they put out. But they put it out anyways. There are a lot of Western dupes. Now, again, is it ideological stupidity? Is it an inability to practice critical thinking? Is it a love or affection for Putin and Russia? Is it blackmail, which was a very, very common Russian tactic to blackmail? Look how many British agents were turned into Russian agents, some from ideological convictions, some from straight up greed, they were paid, and some of them were being blackmailed. In the era, post-war era, Kim Philby being one of the most famous, was a raving homosexual. And homosexuality was frowned upon, and a lot of the British agents were blackmailed into working for the Soviet Union of that time, for Stalin. So I don't know what it is with these dupes. I'm going to name some deserve special mention. If you have a desire to listen to the narratives coming out of Russia and what's being propagated by Western dupes, there is Clayton Morris. You've got to watch him, and I assume his wife. His tactical analysis of Ukraine and what's going on in Ukraine. One of the best. Scott Ritter. This is a convicted a convicted kitty diddler. He touts himself forward as a former UN's weapons inspector and a former U.S. Marine and intelligence officer. This guy is so freaking deluded. Anybody who knows what's going on there listens to the independent tactical analysis of the Ukrainian-Russian war, and then listens to this moron, realizes that he's an idiot. I put in several comments. I've said, if there ever is a war, I want to be on the opposite side of this guy because you're almost guaranteed victory. He is that stupid. Jimmy Dore, there's another one. Listening to him and his analysis of Ukraine and the condemnations. The big one, of course, is, and I'm going to address this in somewhat more detail, is the Nazis, Ukrainian Nazis. I'll get to that. There's this young, I looked up his bio. He's like 22 or 23, Jackson Hinkle, and I think his show is called The Dive. If you want to see a perfect example of the failure of the current educational system, you have to look at this smugly self-righteous, total, absolute idiot, absolutely convinced of his intellectual capability and the accuracy of his analyses. And he's a product of the California educational system. Insofar as you could stomach it, listen to it and watch this guy. It's really, nauseating. And I'll use that word a lot because a lot of this stuff is nauseating content. There are more George Galloway, who's a loudmouth Scots moron, spewing out more pro-Russian and anti-Ukrainian garbage. But there are several things that I think have to be put in context for people who don't understand that region and the history. Are there Ukrainian Nazis? Absolutely. That's without denial. I think, I forget how many, 500,000 or something voted for the Ukrainian Nazi Party. But, and this is a very, very, very big but, our perception of Germany and the Nazis is different from the Ukrainian perception of Germany and the Nazis. And I'll explain. When the Germans came into Ukraine, the Ukrainians, many of them, regarded the Germans as liberators. Not occupiers, not monsters, liberators. Liberating them from Stalin's Bolsheviks. You understand? They thought the Germans were there to free them. I think it was, if my memory serves me well, it was Vinnytsia. 3 Ukrainian divisions, army divisions, defected en masse to Germany and joined the German troops. Now, historically, Germany misplayed it drastically. The Germans accepted foreign troops. They called them Hilfsjäger, foreign helpers. Hiwis, they called them for short. What the Germans did, instead of integrating the Ukrainians into the German units and fighting shoulder to shoulder, which would have given them superior firepower, the Germans stupidly pushed the Ukrainians into the forefront, allowed them to blunt the Russian attacks, waste their ammunition, and get killed, and then they would send in the German troops. And the Ukrainian general, said to the German general, and I'm paraphrasing here, and he said flat out, look, we came to fight and die with you, not for you. Big difference. And the German general later admitted post-war that they had misplayed this, mishandled this tremendously. Now, if you see what's going on today in Russia, that's very Russian. They are taking these conscripts, poorly equipped, ill-trained. They're not taking a lot of wasting time training them properly to a proper military standard, teaching them unit. I won't get into the tactics, everything, because they're cannon fodder. They send in these poor, dumb bastards into the forefront for 2 reasons. Make the Ukrainian forces expend munitions, mowing these guys down, and make the Ukrainians reveal their positions so that they can lay counter battery or mortar fire on the Ukrainian positions. So they're basically sending these guys to slaughter. And they send in the better trained, better equipped troops to follow, clamber over the bodies of their dead countrymen. That's very Russian, unchanged from the Second World War. They used to send the penal battalions in first to to fight the Germans and let them get mowed down for the same thing: expose your position and waste ammunition. So there you go, the evolution of tactics, World War II style tactics. Something a lot of people here don't understand about Russia and Russians. Russians as a nation, not individuals, as a nation, Russia has an incredible inferiority complex. And they are massively insecure. They desperately want to be regarded as a civilized nation, being able to sit at the table with civilized nations, with the European sophisticated civilized people. They're not. And this war is exposing the true nature, that under this veneer of civilization, the true nature of Russia is exposed. Scratch that veneer of civilization, and you're looking at freaking barbarians, rape, murder, looting, mindless barbarity, torture. Their treatment of POWs, as contrasted to the way Ukrainians treat their POWs, the captured POWs that they get, the Russians, they treat them well because they can be exchanged. And one day these people will be free to tell their stories. But you're listening to freed Ukrainian POWs. And now more and more information is coming out about the liberated towns in Ukraine and how the people were treated under the Russian occupation. Brainless, brutal murder, mass graves, Bucha being the most noteworthy example. Russia is an international pariah. They've exposed themselves for what they are. And I read a very good analysis of something about Russia. Russia looks to its past. Ukraine was trying to forge a future for its people. A future for its people. Look at the Russians. We have Tchaikovsky, we have Pushkin, we have Dostoevsky, we have Tolstoy. You had these people, but they were all from before. What are you doing now? A friend asked me a question, and I would put this to anybody who watches this. What does Russia produce that the world wants? And I had to stop and think. And you know what? Nothing. Now, they sell commodities, okay. Gas, oil, minerals. They sell commodities, wheat, and they produce military equipment. That's pretty much it. You can look at almost any other country in the world. Germany produces tremendous automobiles and wonderful woodworking and metalworking equipment. Italy, Ferragamo, Gucci, Lamborghini, Maserati, Ferrari. Italian food, Italian culture is highly regarded. France, cheese, wine, fashion, Dior, Chanel. I could go on. Japan, cars, famous now for cars, and tremendous tools and equipment. What does Russia produce that the world desires? What have you seen made in Russia, product of Russia? Stolichnaya, Moskovskaya vodka? You can get better vodka. We Canadians make, Americans make better vodka. The Poles make better vodka than the Russian vodka. And they know it. They know they are nowhere near as sophisticated, as well educated, as worldly, as cosmopolitan, as almost any Western European or North American nation. And they know it, and they hate it. So that's why you get all the Russian bluff and bluster. Look at Russian culture. What culture? It's all past stuff. What have you done recently? What have you produced in the line of music? What have you produced in the line of literature? What do you produce for consumer goods that people say, let's set up business here in Russia? It is one of the most venal, corrupt, closed societies in the world. Now, journalists who report from Russia, the first thing you have to understand, if you are allowed to exercise journalistic work within the sphere of Russian influence, it's going to be a load of unmitigated crap. Because the state, the Russian state, only allows vetted journalists, and by vetted I mean those who will propagate the Russian narrative. There's no fact, there's no truth. It's pro-Russian trash, because that is the only way you can operate within Russia as a journalist. Patrick Lancaster is a perfect example. Look at his stuff. What turned this American into Putin's little bitch, I don't know, but it's, I'll watch as much of his content as I can stomach. Russia lies. They lie about their actions. One of the big ones, of course, is we are only targeting military infrastructure. And take a look at the liberated towns and villages. How much of it was military? How many schools? How many universities? How many hospitals? How many residential areas flattened? Or Ukrainian forces are embedding soldiers and ordnance into these areas, and that's why we attack them. If anybody believes that, then you are truly a deluded fool. This is a war of genocide, a war of destruction. An attempt to eradicate, again, like they have historically, eradicate Ukrainian culture, Ukrainian national identity, and Ukraine as a separate, free, and independent nation. Because the route that Ukraine was going on with allying with the Western nations, becoming more sophisticated, more intelligent, better educated, reflected at Russia exactly how freaking backward they truly are in the nations, in the global list of nations. Russia is a backward, barbaric, brutal, ill-educated country. Ukraine has free access to the internet. People saw the Western lifestyle. People saw Western goods, sought Western goods, better educated. Look at the music. Look at the nature. Even in the face of Russian barbarity, they're still holding concerts. And what did Russia do? Look up, by the way, Yuri Karpatenko. He was a Ukrainian conductor, orchestral conductor. The Russians insisted that he come to a concert because by having him there, they're desperate to get this cloak of respectability, of legitimacy. By having him there, it would legitimize, in their minds, the Russian occupation. He refused. And he made it quite clear that he's pro-Ukrainian and he's not going to attend their concert to be a propaganda figurehead. So they shot him. Right? That's Russia. That's Russian. Do as we say or we will kill you. Now another big propaganda thing. Ukraine refuses to negotiate with Russia. Yeah, they do, for a very good reason. You don't negotiate with Russia. I've used this analogy many times. You cannot negotiate. You cannot negotiate with a rabid animal. Either you kill it or it will kill you. End of story. That's negotiation. Russian negotiation is give us what we want or we will kill you. Do what we say or we will kill you. That's Russian negotiation. So what they will do is set terms that are so absolutely unacceptable. Look at the terms they set. Depose Zelensky, disarm Ukraine. Really? Ukraine refuses, we come to table and make offer, and Ukraine refuses to negotiate. It is Ukrainians' fault. Yeah, right. So to anybody who watches this, I would say, think. Look at both sides of the coin. Okay? Don't swallow the narrative. There's excellent content posted out there, and I'm talking independent content that lays out both the actions of Russia. Journalists, independent journalists, are now going into deoccupied territories and reporting on the findings. It's enough to make you cry. Now, of course, my background is Ukrainian, and I admit to a degree of bias, but I am also an extremely objective individual. There are two sides to almost every story. And even in the worst propaganda, sometimes there's a grain of truth, and sometimes not. It's just pure propaganda. But I would ask, if you wish to get a handle on what's going on, watch both sides of the coin, but seek out independent content. Institute for the Study of War, Oryx, Paul, U.S. Army veteran, does tremendous stuff. Denis Davidov, very, very good commentator. Even though he's Ukrainian, he's objective. Where Russia's gaining, where Russia's losing, what's happening. These are all excellent content to give you a better idea of countering the Russian lies about both their losses and their successes. So, Slava Ukraini, Slava Heroyam. Let fact dominate your thinking, objectivity dominate your thinking. But please do not propagate the Russian lies, either about Russia or about Ukraine. I think Russia is going to lose this war. Ukraine will remain an independent nation, because the only way they could conquer Ukraine would be to literally eradicate the entire nation. The hatred for Russia that the actions of Russia have sown now into the Ukrainian heart and the Ukrainian people will never, ever go away. Trust me, I know. The Slavic people have long memories, and they're good haters. And the very thought that there can ever now be a détente, a peaceful coexistence, an amicable coexistence with Russia, is lost for generations. And to those people who say, look at all, we are stripping our cupboards bare to help Ukraine. And yes, you are. The US, tremendous amount. Britain, tremendous amount. Canada, not so much. And I understand it's a hardship. I understand it takes away resources that could be used by your own people. But there are two things I would ask those people to bear in mind. One is the old quote that all that is necessary for evil to triumph is that good men do nothing. Well, good men, and even not so good men, are stepping up and helping. And the other thing I would ask those of you who decry the flow of money and goods to Ukraine, they're fighting for their survival. Are you? So, thus endeth the morning. Thank you, those of you who listen. Comments are more than welcome.